And now, the Rink Rap Podcast from Forever Blue Shirts, talking all things New York Rangers hockey. Here's your host, Jim Cerny.
What's up, Blue Shirts faithful? I am Jim Cerny. This is the Rink Rap Podcast. Thanks for tuning in again this week. Thanks for liking, subscribing, doing all those cool things, following us over at Forever Blue Shirts on the website and all our work there. And thanks for following along even when I was gone for a week, back from the Canadian Rockies. Lake Louise and Banff and Canmore. It was a beautiful trek for me and my family. And Dan Duva joins us in our first broadcast back here, first podcast back. Dan, of course, the voice of the Vegas Golden Knights right from day one. That's a good gig to have right from day one. He is the voice of the Vegas Golden Knights. He's also a local dude, and we're gonna dig into that history as well. Dan joins us here today, so thanks for a few minutes, Dan.
Hi, Jim. Great to be with you. Great to see you. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. You know, one of the things I saw on my trip, other than I didn't see elk, I didn't see black bears, so we did have our bear spray when we went hiking because we were warned in the Canadian Rockies. Yeah. But our final night, we came out of the Canadian Rockies and we stayed in Calgary, because our flight was early in the morning out of Calgary. Yeah. And I got to see the building of the new arena, the new Scotia, whatever they're going to call it, arena. And it just flooded me with these great memories of broadcasting and covering games as a reporter, in the Saddle Dome. So I needed to find out from you, are you a catwalk guy or are you not a catwalk guy?
Oh, definitely.
Nice.
A catwalk guy, Jim. You got to live dangerously. I mean, they shoot off flames before.
The flames, yes.
So if I can withstand the flames, I can certainly withstand a walk across the catwalk. I've sort of been lobbying privately for a catwalk in the new building. I'm not sure if they're going to do that.
I don't think you're going to get that one. They're going to say, Dan, no.
I love that.
You're lucky you're going to get a broadcast spot.
That's a good point. I in Detroit, they did it well because they consulted Ken and Ken with how to build a broadcast booth in the press box. But I don't think that has happened in some of the other places. Edmonton was supposed to have a gondola or a press bridge, but from what I am told, they ran out of money, so they didn't build one at all. They just put a press box above the last row, so it feels like you're in St. Albert, even though you might actually do that.
Right. So, I mean, listen, let's get this out of the way first. I'm old, okay? So when I was broadcasting games, you still had some of the older arenas, and Montreal Forum was in its last stages and everything. Wow. But where the broadcast, and of course, I was doing the Islanders, so Nassau Coliseum, there was no better spot. Like, you were dead central, close to the ice, but further, far enough back that you were able to, watch all the action. But then the new building started to come, and you went higher and higher and higher.
Further back.
And see, that's a broadcaster right there. Yeah. He knows where I was going next. It wasn't just the height. It was the depth. You're so removed in some of these buildings, from trying to call the action.
Yeah, Edmonton is high. We can deal with high. That's okay. It's the slope. We just think of some of the buildings, and I just think of like baseball, Yankee Stadium, the old one, is so vertical, steep, right? And with the new Yankee Stadium, it's not as steep. It's the slope is more so, and it's not quite the cathedral feeling that it had been. And that's sort of like what the new hockey buildings are like. In like Edmonton, for example, they needed room originally to put in these gondolas or the press bridge, but then they didn't put them in. So the slope was very shallow, and that's not good for us. So you feel like you're even further away when you're in that kind of position. But T-Mobile Arena is fine. It opened the same year as Little Caesars in Detroit, but it was being built before they knew for sure there was going to be a hockey team. But I have high hopes for the building in Calgary.
Yes, exactly. But you're going to miss the gondola, because I admit, whether I broadcast or whether I was there as a reporter, pregame warmups, I am on the gondola. I am looking straight down at the ice, look left, go over here, look right, watch warmups.
Some of these buildings, and Calgary and the Saddle Dome is one of the last ones that feels like a minor league arena in a lot of ways. Not so much the capacity, but the proximity to the ice. And I remember just in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, where they filmed a lot of Slapshot, Charlestown Chiefs, that booth, and it's the same booth from the movie, that it was so narrow, and especially if you're playing 3 games in 3 days, and by Sunday afternoon you're pretty tired, you couldn't sit down. You had to stand because you had to lean forward. Yeah. And in so doing, if you leaned forward, you could only see one way or the other. But thank goodness the walls were so tight, so you'd lean on the wall. Look that way. And then you'd lean on this wall. And you needed to lean on the wall when it was 3 games in 3 days in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. So I don't think we're going to have to go that far. But Saddle Dome was a place, Jim, I thought that it might have been built in the early 80s, but it's like they took blueprints out of the drawer from the 1960s. It feels older. It's about the same age as the Meadowlands, and I know the Meadowlands has been gone for a while now. It's a regular building. But anyway, we could talk about arenas all day. I love talking arenas and broadcast booths and stuff like that.
That's the minutia that we get into. These are the things that get us going on a hot August, whatever. What day of the week is it? Wednesday, hot August Wednesday, late in the summer here. But we know you're a Jersey guy, of course, right? So I know you worked for the Trenton Devils, but were you definitely a Devils kid growing up? And if so, who was your guy? And, I know you have a little history with Doc Emrick as well.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, I will. And I, with apologies to our Rangers followers here, the 1994 Rangers just crushed me as a Devils fan, as a kid. I mean, in New Jersey, of course, I grew up in Nutley, and I probably had more friends who are Rangers fans than Devils fans. And so when the Rangers won that series against the Devils, Stefan Matteau and Howie Rose, it just crushed me as 8 or 9 years old, I guess. And it just crushed me. I loved hockey, loved the Devils. And, hockey was so big in New York at the time. The Seinfeld episodes, right? With Buddy and like the Rangers Devils play, like that was an episode on Seinfeld. That's how big of a deal it was. It's kind of hard to think about that now, 32 years later. But then the Devils, well, I should mention the lockout happens, right? Rangers win 94, but then there's no hockey, which was just even harder to swallow. I remember getting a Devils sweatshirt for Christmas in 94, but then the Devils come and win the cup in 95, and that redeemed my childhood. So yeah, I was a Devils fan 95 and then 2000, 2003, but I'd go to the upper deck of the Meadowlands with a tape recorder. Make practice play-by-play tapes. I was playing baseball in high school. I played roller hockey in high school, but I broadcast my high school hockey games. My family moved to Ridgewood at that point. So Ridgewood had a very good hockey team. I was broadcasting those games, but I would go with my buddy Guy Benson. He and I were broadcasting the Ridgewood hockey games, but we would go to Devils games, do practice tapes, and then we would go and pester the announcers. Mike Miller, Randy Velishek on the radio, and Doc Emrick, and of course Chico Resch on television. So we'd just be bothering those guys after the games and try to, just pick their brain about broadcasting, and they were just so generous. But yeah, Devils through and through, right through my time as an employee there with the Devils in Trenton in the ECHL. That's very cool. I mean, that's the dream, right? For the kids that are listening out there. I had the same thing. I was a kid from Queens, and I did the same thing, whether it was at Shea, whether it was at the Garden, whether it was at the Coliseum, wherever I could get in. I had my little tape recorder, and people thought I was out of my mind, and I was. I still am. But you do what you love. You love it.
Yeah. And so, of course, as I mentioned, with the Golden Knights since day one, which of course also means you're going to like this segue. This is a professional segue right here, setting you up. It also means you've been there for the entire run of Pavel Dorofeyev. And of course, you liked it, huh? Smooth, day one. You covered his whole career. Yeah.
He's a pro, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, I am. And I torn rotator cuff from doing this. Right? But listen, Ranger fans are fired up. I wrote a story back in May. I said, if there's a dream scenario this offseason, Rangers have so many holes to fill, in organizationally, not only at the NHL level, but organizationally, right? Prospects, minor leagues, everything. If there's a dream scenario, it's, here's a guy. He might shake free in Vegas. If you could get a guy in his prime, a natural goal scorer, something you don't have in your lineup, a guy who killed it, crushed it in the postseason as well. Boy, do everything you can to do it. I said, it's a dream. Probably not going to be able to, happen. Vegas always is able to keep all their guys and then keep adding, right? So why would it be any different now? But wow, it was different. And so start right from, I guess, the moment that you hear about the trade. Did you sense any rumblings? Did you sense that maybe Dorofeev would not be back in Vegas this year? And I guess were you as blown away as the rest of us when that trade went down on day one of the draft?
Yeah, not totally surprised. When you think about his success and the fact that he's a restricted free agent, meanwhile, you're watching the Flyers make their offer sheets and that whole situation. If not for the salary cap and the restricted free agency and the threat of offer sheets, of course, the Golden Knights would have kept Pavel Dorofeyev. But given the salary cap, I mean, you've got Jack Eichel and Mitch Marner and Noah Hannafin. Those are three of the top 5 picks from the 2015 draft. They are in the primes of their careers. And, the Golden Knights had to trade away, some other pieces too, just to make all of this work. There's enough hope that from within, the goal scoring can be replaced. Part of that would be William Karlsson has basically missed 2 regular seasons, got healthy for the playoffs. So I think that there is some hope between Karlsson being healthy and Mark Stone, who had a productive season when he was healthy, plus some other guys who got opportunities because of injury. So no, I didn't think that they were going to move on from Dorofeev, but there was also the obvious numbers crunch. And if Pavel was going to really demand market value and not take any sort of a hometown discount, the Knights were not going to be able to do it. So either they were going to have to move on from him or move some other people.
Somebody else,
they figured the easiest thing to do was to move on from Pavel. And I don't want to call him a one-dimensional player. That's not fair. But clearly, as a natural goal scorer, the power play goals this year, what do you have? 20 power play goals in the regular season. So out of the 37. So that's a big thing for him. The Knights brought in Victor Olofsson, second tour of duty with Vegas. He has been a power play scorer, so I think they could probably make up the power play goal scoring to some degree there. So it's hard to say that Dorofeev was expendable. That's totally unfair. But he is, to me, just getting better. Has been a streaky goal scorer through his career, Jim, but that streakiness has started to level off a little bit. He was a little quiet start of the postseason, but then, he obviously picked it up in a big way. So to circle back to your original question, not totally surprised, only a little bit surprised, just a numbers game. He's a terrific pickup for the Rangers, no doubt about it.
Yeah, it's interesting. You mentioned, the playoff scoring. He started a little slowly, and then obviously you end up with 12, right? The second most in the NHL in the postseason.
And Brett Howden, I should have mentioned earlier, Brett Howden finished at 14.
Yeah,
right? And that was a big surprise after in the regular season. He only had 4, I think. It was.
Right. A former Ranger. So speaking of Ranger ties, of course. But with Dorofeev, just with you mentioning specifically the playoffs, how quickly you can change a narrative. Yeah. Because he had been in the postseason before. And of course, because he has a 35-goal regular season, a 37-goal regular season, and people are like, oh, well, he can do it in the regular season, but these 1 or 2 playoffs, where were the numbers? And at the beginning of the playoffs, you started to hear those whispers again. And boy, did he shut that down.
Yeah. And I'll just share with you a recollection I have from being at the White House with the Golden Knights in the fall of 2023 after the Knights had won the Stanley Cup. And all of the players who had been part of the championship team were up on the stage with the president and all that sort of stuff. It was really neat. But there were a couple of coaches who were new to the organization, not up on the stage. Pavel Dorofeyev was not one of the players up on the stage. He had not been part of that team, though he had, appeared in a game, he was around, but he wasn't really on the team in 23 for the Cup. Just goes to show, he's 25. He'll turn 26 in October. the numbers in the regular season of the playoffs, like it's not like he's only a regular season player. We're watching his growth in real time. The Golden Knights, George McPhee and Kelly McCrimmon, have very much had the belief of overcooking a guy in the minor leagues. Now, it's a little bit different when you're a contender like the Knights are every year. Guys might have to stay in the minors a little bit longer unless they're pressed into service because of injury. But, even in the postseason last year and a couple of years ago, Pavel did not necessarily have a spot secured. And that's not because he wasn't good enough. It's because he was still developing. He had to be a more responsible player at both ends of the ice. John Tortorella was the coach for this postseason. But prior to that, with Bruce Cassidy, Bruce needed to be able to trust Dorofeev at every situation, that you could put any line on the ice against any opposing line. And Pavel wasn't necessarily at that stage yet. He's gotten bigger. He's smarter. I think he's more comfortable with himself. He's, English, of course, is not his first language. I remember the first time he and I did a radio interview, and just over the course of a few years got more and more comfortable. But I can remember sitting in the White House and watching that presentation, and Pavel Dorofeyev was sitting right in front of me. And to think, I want to be one of those guys. I want to be part of a real cup contender and a cup winning team. And I always had the feeling, and he sort of sheepishly agreed, that was a motivating factor for him, that he had to sit there and watch those guys get honored at the White House, and he was only a spectator. So he's driven. He's a no-nonsense, driven player. And I think he's got more comfortable in his own shoes. And I think that, going to New York, and he has skated in Connecticut. It's not like he's unfamiliar with New York. Yeah. I think I won't be surprised if he does very, very well.
So, and you mentioned, again, good segue here, him skating in Connecticut the last several summers. So he's, familiar, Adam Fox is always there. JT Miller's joined that group the last two summers. Chris Kreider, when he was there, obviously a lot of Rangers skate with Ben Prentice in that group in Connecticut. And he takes part in that Shoulder Check Showcase annual, the charity event every summer. So, been able to speak to him a couple of times. As you said, he didn't speak, a lot of English. He came out, he had to speak with the reporters this year, but he, again, and maybe it's a language thing, and this is why I'm directing the question towards you. Seems like a pretty serious kid, but he seems very mature too. He didn't strike me certainly not like Jim Cerny at 25 years old, but that's a whole other thing. But, but not your typical, even 25-year-old athlete. He just seems very serious, very, very focused. And again, maybe it's a language thing, but if you could talk a little bit more about what the Rangers are getting in this kid off the ice as well.
Yeah. He's someone who I have found to be professional, thoughtful. When as I mentioned a few moments ago, when I talked to him about doing an interview, he was willing to do it. I tried to, sort of soften the situation. If there's something that you're not sure about, or you said something incorrectly, this is recorded, we can edit it. He was fine with it. And it sort of reminded me, I'll tell you this, Jim, in 2013, I guess, or 14, I was in Syracuse with the Syracuse Crunch in the American Hockey League when Nikita Kucherov broke.
Yeah.
And Nikita Kucherov had spent his summer in I think in Montreal, and then was coming to Syracuse for his first professional season. His English also was not very good, but he knew that he was going to need to figure it out. I mean, he was watching American TV shows to try to get up on the English. And I think you could still find this interview. It's a video interview that I did with Kucherov. He's similar, he probably should not have done it. His English was probably not to have done it, but he knew that he had to do it. It was a way of challenging himself. It was a confidence thing. So I found that reminiscent of Dorofeev to Kucherov, where they probably weren't ready to do it yet in terms of their language skills, but there was a determination, a challenge, realize the situation, and you've got to rise to it. And I don't know that Dorofeev is going to become Nikita Kucherov, but I didn't know Kucherov was going to become Kucherov at the time either. So clearly they've had great success. And Dorofeev speaks with great reverence about other Russian players. Of course, it was great for him to have Ivan Barbashev with the Golden Knights. Ivan, had won the cup with the St. Louis Blues as more of a fourth line guy. And with Vegas, he's become, most often he's been a top line winger, and he's put up some great numbers, was with the team for the 23 Cup and has been a big part of the group ever since. But Ivan, unlike Kucherov and Dorofeev, he is not shy. His English is fantastic. He's got an accent, but he's jovial, loquacious. And I think that Dorofeev being around Barbashev so that they could communicate with each other, they share so much in common. But Ivan, I think, was sort of an example to Dorofeev about how just because your language is not where it could be, it's just his personality more than anything. So to your point, I think that maybe a little bit of shyness, yes, regardless of language. There's a little bit of that, but driven, focused, business-like. I mean, he laughs, but you can see that his brain is always going. He's always observing. He doesn't have a lot to say, but he's going to be pointed with his remarks. And when I've brought up certain things like, Pavel, like, you've done this, you're over there for the one-timer on the power play, like it's like the timing, the speed, it must be so difficult. He says, not for me. Oh, okay. Well, he's willing to give you that sort of stuff and be honest with you. And so maybe not a lot to say, but I've been very impressed by Pavel. I've always enjoyed my interactions with him. And I hope that he continues. I don't know if he'll score another 37 or maybe more, but I really think that he's a good person to have in your room. It's certainly going to be a benefit to the team on the ice, and I think will be a good addition off the ice too. Interesting. Yeah. When you talk about these players, like I could never fathom like going to, Russia and being a North American, and just trying to live life, much less actually excel at your profession, trying to switch roles or whatever. But it made me think, Igor Shesterkin, he can speak English, he's been here for a while, and he can joke, you can tell he understands things, and he can deliver humor. He prefers not to deal with the media that much. Rangers don't make him available that often, which is tough. You're talking about their most important player, night in, night out. But I found it very funny a couple years ago. He'd be available and he'd joke with the reporters and answer questions and what have you. And the second somebody brought up, so have you and the Rangers, are you continuing those extension talks, or I don't speak English. He would pull that card, so he was being funny, but he's like, I'm going to use this to my advantage. I am not answering that question. Yeah, so. I think Kucherov has done that too. Yeah. Oh, Kuch is a piece of work, actually. Yes, he is. Yeah. So on the ice, obviously, we've all watched him. We've seen the highlights, we see the games, we see him come up big in big games. Listen, he's a natural, pure goal scorer, something the Rangers absolutely need. What is it that we don't know about his game? Because we haven't seen him every day. We haven't seen him at practices. We don't see him every game here in New York, that you had the advantage of, that maybe you can bring to the table here. Yeah, of course, the one-timer power play over on the right side, it's just it's a wicked shot. It doesn't miss very often. And when you're getting set up by Jack Eichel, you better be ready. You got Tomas Hertl and Mark Stone around the net. You had Mitch Marner out high. So there's a high-end talent on the ice for the Golden Knights power play this year, most successful in their history. And Dorofeev had 20 of the team's power play goals. They finished with 58 in the regular season. So I think that this is, for Dorofeev, not only a step to, show that he can do it at even strength. He has, right? I mean, 20 power play, 17 even strength. But I mentioned this briefly a few minutes ago with respect to, can he be trusted on the ice if it's not an offensive situation? Forget the power play, forget the O-zone draws. You have him on a line that has to take a D-zone draw. Is he going to be trusted out there? And I have found that the his growth has been most impressive in that respect, that he is responsible, that he is well positioned, that he can engage in and win some board battles. I haven't seen him since June, so I don't know how much muscle he may or may not have put on, but he certainly, over the course of the few years that I've been around him, has gotten stronger. And that's what you need to win those battles. I have no doubt that he recognizes those things because, again, you want to be on the ice in the big situations. In order to score the big goal, you've got to be trusted to be on the ice. And to earn that trust, you have to be available for every scenario. I mean, Jack Eichel, he's going to put up 80, 90, maybe 100 points, but he's one of the best defensive centers in the game. And I think has been shafted, frankly, for Selke consideration. But like Dorofeev he's not going to win a Selke, but I think that he's done more, especially as a winger, to engage in those board battles. So I would have an eye on, is he engaging in those board battles, winning control of the puck in those situations that have little to do with immediately scoring a goal, right? That he can do. It's some of that other stuff. The Golden Knights are big on quick puck retrievals, defensemen getting the puck into the hands of the forwards and getting out of the zone quickly. You have to be well positioned. You have to read off your teammates to do that. And it seemed to me that Dorofeev was increasing his prowess in that respect. So that's what I would want to see from Pavel early in the season. What does he look like in those board battles, and how well positioned is he in terms of breaking out?
And of course, that right there, everything you said, if you don't play that game for Mike Sullivan, you don't play a lot. Now, granted, Dorofeev is going to play, and he's making $11 million to play a lot and score a lot of goals, but he's not going to be trusted. You have to earn Sully's trust. And I'm not saying you can't, you don't have to earn the trust of other coaches, but Sully is very, very, very demanding that way.
Yeah, and just and obviously John Tortorella and
yes,
Sullivan and Tortorella have been tied together for a long time, and most recently with the Olympics. Tortorella put Dorofeev up on the top line in the last game, and the Knights lost. But that's how much Dorofeev impressed John Tortorella. Torts was trying to find the right combinations to get things jump started there, and at the end of the series, the Knights had taken a 1-0 lead and a 2-1 series lead, but ended up losing in 6. But Dorofeev had impressed Tortorella to the point that Pavel had moved up to what had been Ivan Barbashev's spot. So I would imagine that if Sullivan and Tortorella have spoken at some point over the last couple of months, that Pavel Dorofeev's name was probably in that conversation.
Yeah, I would think so. So a lot of the questions here, and listen, he's a hell of a goal scorer. And it's not just the one, like obviously everybody points to the one-timer because it's elite. It's an elite weapon he has, but he scores goals different ways and he gets to the net, to cash in those goals as well. Like he just sniffs it out. He knows where to be. Again, this is just from a guy that's certainly watched his games, but not on an everyday basis like you, of course. But those are my observations, and I think most people would agree. However, the big question here, and I put it in your hands, is there are actually people concerned that, well, he doesn't have Jack Eichel setting him up now. Oh, Mitch Marner is not there. Thomas Hertl, and it's a slight a little bit, Mika Zibanejad or JT Miller, whichever center, he ends up playing more with or this coming season. But that said, how crucial is that guy to set up Dorofeev? Is he enough of a play driver on his own, or does he really, really require having that, that elite setup guy or two to get him going?
I would imagine that Pavel's game will grow in that way. Is he someone who's driving your line? Probably not. But, that's, I think, to be said for a lot of guys who score goals. Just thinking about, Jack Eichel, Mitch Marner, and Ivan Barbashev, and Mark Stone, and, like I mentioned, there's a lot of guys on the Golden Knights who are capable of scoring goals. Yet the guy who scored the most was Pavel Dorofeyev. So there's something to be said for that. Like, everybody recognizes that he was in the best position so often. The Rangers have players who can help set up Pavel Dorofeyev. It's not like he's, the only star, the only guy who can score on a team that's otherwise bereft of talent. I think he'll be fine in that respect. Is it going to be different for him when he doesn't have those players? Yeah, of course, they're high-end players, but it's not just that they're high-end players. There's a comfortability. You've got experience with those guys. So it will, I imagine, take a little bit of time for him to figure out his new teammates. He's never changed organizations before. So that would be a challenge for any player. I mean, Noah Hannafin had, he talked about it when he went from Carolina to Calgary, and then he talked about it from Calgary to coming to Vegas, because then Rasmus Anderson had come from Calgary to Vegas. And so they had that experience together in Calgary, and Anderson talked about it with Hannafin coming over there for the first time. Anyway, you get my point. When you change teams, it's just a natural thing that will happen. Would other teams find a way to defend Dorofeev, to try to eliminate him? If I were making a game plan, I would try to eliminate Dorofeev too. So, but I think that just his growth curve, Jim, has been impressive enough that I wouldn't have concerns about that. Again, he's still only 25, and he's already scored 30 goals in the league twice. So, so again, it seems to, and I'll tell you about another former Ranger and former Golden Knight, Reily Smith, was another one of those guys that skated with Dorofeev in Connecticut. And when Reily came back to the Golden Knights the second time around, we were talking about Dorofeev, and he said, if I could have purchased stock in a hockey player, I would have purchased stock in Pavel Dorofeev at that point when they first started skating together in Connecticut. And Reily knows his stuff. Game-winning goal in the Stanley Cup clincher. Like, if Reily can buy stock in Pavel Dorofeev and think that he's still on his way up, I think I'll buy that stock too.
All right, last Dorofeev question. Now, on top of, all right, we've kind of set it up. Okay, he doesn't necessarily need Eichel and Marner, to be the guys to set him up. He's, probably will find his way with Fox, Savannah, Chad Miller, which I totally agree with. What about the weight of the contract? Right, that's a lot of money going to a new team, big city, big market. Now, listen, he played on a team that had hell of a big expectations here. I mean, the Golden Knights are expected to win every year. Rangers are digging themselves out of a hole right now, but he's expected to be like at the forefront of helping them get out of that hole. So the contract, New York, how do you think he deals with that?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I wish I had a great answer for you. When you think about, the stars on the Golden Knights, if you were a reporter from out of town and you had to make a list of, okay, I want to interview Jack Eichel, Mitch Marner, Noah Hannafin, Shea Theodore. Like, if you were to make a list of like, okay, here are all the guys who stand out, Pavel Dorofeyev might not be that high on the list, even though he scored 37. I think Dorofeev's a little higher up on the depth chart, given his new role there and the new contract with the Rangers. So that's a very good question. It's his first real payday. He was making less than $2 million with the Golden Knights on his last contract. So now that this is big boy money, and living up to it, I don't think, not for a moment would I think that now he's got the payday, now he's good, and he's not going to try as hard to keep getting back. That's not his personality. I don't see that at all. I still think that he's driven. I think that he really likes the stage, and he's become comfortable with the stage of incredible crowds. I mean, T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, every game is standing room only. Yeah. And the preseason games are standing room only. And of course, it has been host to 3 Stanley Cup finals, and Pavel's been part of a couple of runs here now. So to play on the biggest stage on the planet, Madison Square Garden, I think he's ready for that. I think that he comes ready to embrace expectations, not only for himself, but for the team. If the team's not doing well, he's not going to be happy. Like, he's expecting to win. So I'll be interested to see if he is, one of the more leaned upon players, how he handles that. But, heck, this is like he's at the age now, like this is when Jack Eichel came over to the Golden Knights, and sure, he had all that pressure on him in Buffalo.
Yeah.
That trade, he has the surgery and all of that. And then his first full season with the Knights, 22-23, he wins the Stanley Cup and was neck and neck with Marchessault for the Conn Smythe. So again, I'm not saying that Dorofeev is going to be a Conn Smythe contender with the Rangers who win the Stanley Cup this year, but that also wouldn't shock me. It wouldn't shock me if that happened. It just seems to me that he's someone who, rather than feeling the weight of pressure, will embrace it.
And Dan, I think Dorofeev is listening, or his agent or whatever, and they're calling in here.
That's what it is.
So you might have to take that in a second. Quick final one for you, because we mentioned Torts. I had, to be honest, the pleasure to have a front row seat of Torts' entire run is when he was on Broadway. We, coach with the Rangers, and I know the warts and all with Torts. And I think there are fewer warts now than there were then, or rough edges, I should say. But I loved my experience with him. Like, I get it. I understood post-game Torts was not the same as the next day Torts. And I learned so much. Now, I know you were only around him a short time of 3 months. But what was your experience like with Torts? What were some of your takeaways from him? Maybe some things that you thought about him going into that experience that, you're like, oh yeah, or, oh, really? Just curious, because to me, I had years with him. You only had months, but I really enjoyed the experience. I really liked Torts.
As did I. I understand why the organization decided to move on and make Ryan Craig the new head coach. Ryan Craig, for those who don't know, is the new Golden Knights head coach. He'd been a Golden Knights assistant for 6 years. After the Knights win the Cup in 23, the organization makes him the AHL head coach, where he's been the last 3 seasons. So Ryan Craig has been with the team for 9 years. They think this is the time to make him an NHL head coach. He would have been in line to replace Bruce Cassidy when they made the change in late March, but they didn't want to do that to Ryan. They wanted to give him a fresh slate. Let's see if we can jumpstart the team. John Tortorella is available. So
lightning in a bottle.
Right. So when Tortorella arrives, I'd spoken to him, but he wouldn't really remember me. But it was a Sunday they made the change. Monday, there was an introductory press conference and a game that night. So not only was John introduced to the media, then I was going into his office to record my pregame interview. I record interview with the coach before every game for 9 years. And first of all, I was hopeful that he would agree to do it. He did. But, I was not going to go and ask him a question about, what are you going to do with the Knights power play? Or how are you going to, No, I was looking to build a rapport. I wanted to establish trust from the outset. So as you know, Jim, I'm someone who loves baseball. And in college, I broadcast baseball in the Cape Cod Baseball League. And I knew that John Tortorella played baseball. That's right. Not only hockey, but he played baseball and hockey at the University of Maine. And as it happened, one of my close friends from who played at the University of Maine and the Chatham A's in the Cape Cod Baseball League, Kevin McAvoy. Kevin was a freshman All-American in Maine. He's from Maine. And I had gone up to visit Kevin and his family back in February during the Olympics. So we were watching the Olympics from Maine, from Orono, Maine. So I walk into Tortorella's office and say, hi, John. I was calling him John at that point. John, when's the last time you were in Orono, Maine? And he laughs, right? So, why would you ask me that? It was my buddies and we went back. We still thought we were the big men on campus. There was a Marshall Tucker band concert. I got into some trouble, but why would you ask me that? And I said, of course, I was there last month. He said, no way. And so I told my buddy from Cape Cod played there, and so on and so on. And I said, I'll give you another one. One of my connections in Chatham in the Cape League, and he said, the Cape League, is that still around? Yes, it is. But my host family there, their kids went to Concord Carlisle High School in Massachusetts. He says, that's where I went to high school. I said, I know. So right from there was an immediate rapport. And I can't thank him enough for the time and the discussion that we had where, there might be a press conference where, frankly, the questions weren't as good as they should have been. And John would offer requisite answers if the questions weren't very good. So he'd complain about that, understandably. But then I'd sit in his office and we'd talk for 10 minutes. I only had 4 minutes of airtime, but I'd record a 10-minute interview and we'd break it up, or I'd post it online so we could get it all out there. But he was great. I loved talking with him. He also kept me on my toes. You had to have thoughtful questions. You had to listen carefully to what he was saying.
Yes.
Because if you just asked a generic question that didn't interest him, that wasn't good enough. I was interested in stuff that made him want to talk about something,
right?
Sort of scratch that itch, find the nerve, not a nerve that would upset him, but a nerve that would get him talking. It's not my job in a pregame interview to play gotcha. The goal is to try to help reveal something, whether it's information or an opinion. And that was my goal. And I loved talking with John Tortorella before every Golden Knights game. 1 or 2 times, you could tell that he was probably had his mind on something else. But he was always respectful, always gave me whatever time I needed. And I just am very thankful that I had the opportunity to spend as much time with him as I did.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. I love that. Boy, did you go in with a game plan. I am so impressed by you. Yeah. I'll tell you another thing too. And you're probably going to nod your head and go, oh yeah. The one thing, and I'm not saying you did this, but it would happen like in the scrums or post-game, pre-game, press conferences and stuff. I'll tell you what he hates. He hates so much a non-question question.
Oh, gosh. Oh, yeah.
Like if you just make a statement. So, tough practice today.
Oh, gosh. Yeah. No.
Right. Would that set him up? He'd be like, weird. And then he'd stand there.
Yeah.
And the person would be like leaning forward. He'd be like, where's the question? What is your question? I love that about him, because like some coaches or players, they'll just like, all right, I'll take it and give it some generic something or other and get it over and done with.
Generic, Jim, that we don't want generic, and we want something interesting,
right?
And if I felt that if I took the time to think about what I wanted to ask, the topic and the question, right, the query, if I thought of those 2 things and I could frame it in a certain way, he would recognize that, and then would reciprocate with a thoughtful answer. And he made me a better interviewer. I could have, and don't get me wrong, I love Bruce Cassidy too in our interviews, but I could ask Bruce 2 or 3 questions and he could talk for 6 minutes, right?
Right.
He was so willing to share his perspective, and he would break everything down. And he was very good on TNT when he was on television during the playoffs. So I love talking to Bruce Cassidy, but I could say, so Bruce, the power play, your thoughts? And he would say, I wouldn't do that, but I could, and it would be fun.
Yeah.
I could not have done that with Tortorella.
No.
About what I wanted to ask and how I was going to phrase it, the angle of the question, and what possible follow-up question might be there. So he made me a better interviewer.
That's very cool. And it's a good spot to kind of put a bow on this. I definitely wanted to get a couple questions about torts because everyone has their tort stories, but yours is very unique. I am so impressed by how prepared you were to go, you're like, I'm going to defuse this bomb before it goes off, before it even has a chance.
We're people first. We all have a job to do. And if you can connect with someone on a personal basis, and recognize there's still a professional distance there, but if you can connect with someone and help them understand, I'm not out to get you. I'm not here to catch you or play gotcha. I'm interested. I want to have a back and forth. If you can establish that, then perhaps someone will be more interested in going along on the ride with you.
And the thing that people don't get with him too is, he's such a family person. It's all about family with him, right? Yeah. And I think I told this story before on the show. After he got, he let go by the Rangers, he went to Vancouver, which was not a great experience for either side there. But when he came back to the Garden, there's this whole hoo-ha and everything. Torts, he wanted none of that crap, going back to talking about his time with the Rangers or what's happened since, or, compare himself to Alain Vigneault, or he wanted none of that stuff. Right. Yeah. And so there's the scrum after the morning skate, and we're all around there. And I was kind of near the front, and I hadn't talked to him since, well, I had talked to him that summer, but I hadn't talked to him, since the season started, hadn't seen him in all that time. And so you could tell he's just kind of looking out at the crowd. Who can he make a joke with? Or, because, he knew most of us, but it wasn't even a joke. He saw me. He goes, "Hey, Jimmy, how's your boy doing? He's still playing second base, right? How did his season go? He's pitching too, right? Yeah. How did the summer go for him?" And then that was his way of, I think it calmed him down, but it also speaks to, to me, that was Torts, right? Exactly. That was the connection. It was family, not even so much that, we worked together at the Rangers or whatever,
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And just, Carter Hart with the Golden Knights had been with the Flyers when Tortorella was there. And, Carter just spoke so highly of Tortorella in his time away. Obviously, they both left the Flyers for different reasons. And, Carter said how meaningful it was for John Tortorella to reach out and offer, just check in. How are you? What's going on? Yeah. And that was so meaningful to Carter. And Carter was obviously that much more thrilled to then play for him again. So you're exactly right that I could go on and on with examples of other things, just like you said, Jim.
Yeah. He is Dan Duva. He is the voice of the Vegas Golden Knights. He's from Jersey. He's from Fordham University. He's from Syracuse. He Cape Cod League, knows how to diffuse things with John Tortorella. Knows all things. Knows all things. Reily Smith, Brett Howden, Pavel Dorofeyev. He's the guy. This was a lot of fun. I hope I didn't chew up too much of your day here today, but this was a lot of fun for me.
Same here, Jim. Great talking with you. Great to see you.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll hopefully do this again down the road, and we'll see. If you misfire on anything, Dorofeev, I guarantee you these Ranger fans are going to track you down on social media and say, you said. Just remember, it's going to happen. But
I'm ready.
I think the good thing is, I think it's going to go pretty well. So
I think so too.
They won't be coming after you. But I appreciate we may come after you to join us on the show again. Thanks so much.
I would be very happy to do that, Jim. Thanks.